No, that is not true. I only ate livers and hearts. When Soviet officials questioned a man about cannibalism on 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐞 Island, this was his chilling response. This single statement encapsulated the brutality that unfolded on a forgotten island of despair. Against the bleak Siberian landscape, a horrifying scenario played out in the spring of 1933. In just 13 weeks, over 4,000 people disappeared or died on this small island, later nicknamed Cannibal Island. The Soviet government had dumped thousands of undesirables there with almost no supplies, creating a real-life horror story that remained hidden from the world for over 50 years. This is their forgotten tragedy. They asked us, "Where's the railway?" Moscow. We'd never seen a railway or heard of those places. The elderly local's voice trembled as he recalled the first moments when thousands of strangers arrived on their remote Siberian island. His eyes reflected decades-old terror as he described the newcomers' confusion. These people had no idea where they were or how far they'd been taken from civilization. 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐞 Island sits in the middle of the 𝐲𝐵 River in western Siberia, a sliver of land just 3 kilometers long and 600 meters wide. In May 1933, this barren patch became the site of one of Stalin's cruelest experiments. The island had nothing. No buildings, no resources, no farmland. Yet Soviet authorities selected it as the perfect place to dump thousands of unwanted citizens. As the newcomers landed on May 18, 1933, the island's stark features became brutally apparent. Guards forced 4,878 people, 4,556 men, and 322 women off the barges and onto the marshy ground. These deportees received just 20 tons of flour between them, about 4 kilograms per person, their only food supply, with no way to prepare it. Without containers or cooking tools, desperate people mixed it with river water in their clothing and drank the raw slurry, causing immediate illness. The island itself became a weapon against the deportees. Spring flooding swallowed portions of the landmass. Temperatures plummeted below freezing at night, killing those without shelter. Rain turned the ground to mud that swallowed bare feet. The surrounding river, too wide and fast-moving to swim, created a natural prison barrier. Armed guards established positions around the perimeter, shooting anyone attempting escape. This prison of nature had no walls, only a death zone, where desperate swimming meant certain execution. The deportees found themselves trapped in a nightmare, surrounded by trigger-happy guards, treating escape attempts like a hunting game. Death arrived within days. The weakest succumbed first to exposure, unable to withstand the freezing nights. Starvation quickly followed, as the flour mixture caused severe digestive problems. Disease spread rapidly, with dysentery turning the island into an open sewer. The social structure collapsed almost immediately. Criminal gangs organized themselves and established brutal control. They stole flour rations from weaker deportees, then took their clothes, leaving many naked against the elements. The strong stripped the weak of everything, creating a horrific hierarchy where survival meant victimizing others. As days turned to weeks, the food situation deteriorated further. The flour supplies dwindled to nothing. The island offered no natural food sources. Water from the river caused sickness rather than sustenance. The deportees faced an unthinkable choice that would give the island its unofficial name, Cannibal Island. With no resources, no escape, and no help coming, the island had become a laboratory for how quickly human society breaks down when pushed beyond endurance. The worst was yet to come. But who were these people left to die on 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐞? Former merchants, peasants fleeing famine, petty criminals. This was Stalin's own classification of undesirables marked for removal from Soviet society in 1933. Their true crime wasn't violence or political dissent. Their crime was simply not fitting into Stalin's vision of the ideal worker class. The legal machinery that sent thousands to their deaths began with a single document. On December 27, 1932, Stalin's Politburo initiated the passportization campaign, creating the perfect tool to purge cities of what they called superfluous elements. This administrative procedure gave Soviet authorities the power to arrest anyone without proper internal documentation. a paper purge that would lead to a real one. The implementation was swift and terrifying. Police swept through Moscow neighborhoods day and night, arresting anyone who couldn't immediately produce the right papers. Between March and July 1933, Moscow authorities seized over 85,000 people. Leningrad contributed thousands more to the growing human cargo. Most victims were arrested and sent to transit camps within just 2 days, given no time to gather belongings or notify their families. The arrests shattered ordinary lives without warning. A driver heading to catch a movie at the cinema suddenly disappeared. An elderly woman visiting relatives in Moscow never returned home. A factory worker stepping out for lunch vanished without a trace. There were no trials, no hearings, just immediate sentencing to special resettlement in the farthest reaches of Siberia. The operation was conceived at the highest levels of Soviet power. In February 1933, 𝐸𝐬𝐿, head of the secret police, and Matvey Berman, head of the Gulag system, presented Stalin with a proposal to resettle 2 million undesirables to remote regions. On March 11, 1933, the Council of People's Commissars approved the plan, despite the Soviet Union already suffering from widespread famine. Transit camps quickly became overwhelmed. Tomsk alone held more than 25,000 people in facilities designed for far fewer. Local authorities sent alarmed reports describing the deportees as starving and contagious, but their warnings went unheeded. During transport, each person received only 300 grams of bread per day, barely enough to stay alive. Those who survived the journey faced additional torment from criminal gangs deported alongside them. These hardened criminals controlled the transport groups, robbing weaker deportees of their food, clothing, and possessions. By the time they reached 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐞, many arrived nearly naked and already starving. The 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐞 victims weren't enemies of the state in any meaningful sense. They were shopkeepers, farmers escaping famine, and workers who lacked proper paperwork. The Soviet regime's obsession with ideological purity created a system where human lives meant nothing compared to abstract notions of social cleansing. As they disembarked onto 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐞's muddy shores, these city dwellers had no idea they had been sent to a place specifically chosen to ensure their destruction. This cold, efficient removal of lives set the stage for the human nightmare that followed. Just like shashlik, we made skewers from willow branches, cut it into pieces, stuck it on the skewers, and roasted it over the campfire. This wasn't someone describing a traditional Russian meal. This was a survivor explaining to Soviet investigators how they prepared human organs for eating on 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐞 Island. By late May 1933, the food situation on the island reached catastrophic levels. The initial flour supplies vanished within days. Starvation transformed the deportees from desperate humans into something unrecognizable. Their sunken eyes scanned the island for their next meal, regardless of what form it took. The weakest became targets for their rations and, ultimately, their flesh. The strong established a horrific food chain on the island. They stole flour rations from those who couldn't defend themselves. When that ran out, they stripped clothing from the weak, leaving them exposed to the elements. As people succumbed to exposure and starvation, the truly desperate turned to human meat, the only remaining food source on the barren island. Guards stationed around 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐞 watched this nightmare unfold without intervention. Some became active participants, extorting deportees by trading tiny amounts of flour for gold fillings or sexual favors from starving women. Others executed people for minor violations, adding more bodies to the island's growing collection of corpses. Soviet investigators documented evidence of systematic harvesting of human flesh. Bodies showed precise cutting, flesh methodically removed from limbs and torsos. This was deliberate butchery performed by people driven beyond normal human boundaries. Investigators found corpses with muscles carved away, internal organs removed, and limbs severed by tools, not animals. One survivor told officials with disturbing calm, "No, that is not true. I only ate livers and hearts," revealing the psychological barriers many constructed to justify their actions, as if consuming only certain organs somehow lessened their transgression. Most disturbing were reports that cannibalism extended to the living. Eyewitnesses described women tied to trees, having parts of their bodies cut off while still alive, those pieces cooked over open fires. The island descended into a waking nightmare, where screams became so commonplace that survivors reported becoming numb to them. Criminal gangs quickly established control over remaining resources. They viewed weaker deportees as walking food sources to be harvested when necessary, creating territories and protecting their supplies in the island's twisted hierarchy. By early June, when Soviet authorities finally acknowledged the disaster, cannibalism had become 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐫's grim reality. When officials dissolved the settlement, the evidence was undeniable: bodies butchered with methodical precision, makeshift cooking fires surrounded by human bones. The hollow-eyed survivors carried wounds, both physical and psychological, that would never heal. Many deportees were simply transferred to other special settlements deeper in Siberia, locations only marginally better than 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐫 itself. The nightmare had ended on the island, but for many survivors, it merely transformed elsewhere in Stalin's vast archipelago of suffering. When the Soviet boats finally evacuated the survivors from 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐫, the true scale of the horror became clear. Of approximately 6,700 deportees sent to the island, over 4,000 had died or disappeared in just 13 weeks, a mortality rate exceeding 60%. Stalin's regime buried this atrocity in classified archives, silencing survivors and erasing their suffering for half a century. Vasily Velichko, a Communist Party instructor who submitted a damning top-secret report, was promptly fired for his honesty, while the tragedy's architects escaped punishment. 𝐦𝐨𝐫𝐫 Island remains a haunting testament that when a state deems its citizens disposable, human dignity perishes alongside them.